Everybody, Angel Lenise Piles here, and we are back with another WOC conversation on this beautiful, beautiful day. And I have the pleasure of sitting down and speaking with Camille Irving. Camille is a tech leader with a range of experience and a sharp point of view. She currently serves as the Vice President of Operations at Uber and the General Manager of US and Canada Mobility. After joining Uber's pricing team in 2018, she played a key role in the company's journey toward profitability. So, as you can imagine, today's talk is about scaling and going from revenue generating, how to price your business for profitability. And I can't think of anyone more perfect to lead that conversation than you. Yes. I know a lot of your career is sort of based in CPG, now with Uber Tech, but I know it's going to be applicable across the board. I think when we think about small business, big business, no matter how much revenue you generate, no matter how many customers, no matter your industry or sector, profitability is the goal for so many of us. And I say us because I'm a startup founder myself. I have a beauty startup and, customers and traction and, addressable markets. Those are all great things. But the bottom line for success and an indicator of that these days is profitability. So I kind of want to start at the beginning. I think you have such an interesting career with a focus on scaling and profitability, but you didn't necessarily start there, right? So can you give us a little bit more about your background and how you sort of
Yeah,
landed in the role you're
certainly.
in
So I'll
today?
go way, way back. My very first job was in sales. I was selling in the healthcare industry, selling medical supplies to hospitals. And I'll start there because thinking about pricing was actually really important even then, uh, because I sold very high quality devices and supplies for hospitals, which meant that there were cheaper options out there. And hospitals, some of them are for profit, some of them are not profit, but all of them, especially the people who are responsible for buying supplies, are trying to figure out how to balance between getting their costs down as low as possible and delivering the best care. And so I had to
Mhm.
use like my knowledge of analysis and my knowledge of our pricing and the efficacy of my products to explain that if you spend a little bit more money on these high quality products, you will save in the long run through fewer infections, through better care. You won't have to use as many of them. I was selling like tapes and wound care and that kind of thing. And so the idea of connecting what people really cared about, which was delivering great care, to what people were responsible for, which
Mhm.
was savings and efficiency, started very, very early in my career. So to tell you the story, my first job was in sales, as I mentioned. I knew that I wanted to like get into marketing and run bigger businesses. So I then went to business school at Kellogg and focused on marketing and innovation, entrepreneurship. I studied lots of things at Kellogg and ultimately landed at Procter and Gamble. And while I was at P&G, I worked on some really iconic CPG brands from Tampax, which is obviously fem care, but fem care has a lot of beauty positioning. I also worked on Puffs tissues, Charmin toilet paper, Bounty toilet paper, just some of the big iconic ones. And again, I'm always selling the premium product. But if you walk into the grocery store, there's lots of off label things that you can get. And a lot of people might say, hey, it's just toilet paper. I don't need to get the brand. And yet, brands
Sure.
lead in that category because brands can be very powerful. And so, what I learned in that phase was just
Mhm.
how important it is to build a brand where you're making a promise that signals quality, that signals experience, that signals something that your consumers want, and then
Mhm.
they are willing to pay more for it. And I learned that year after year, day after day, while selling toilet paper. And so I then went and spent some time working on a startup. And that was interesting. I was a startup within P&G, particularly focused around menopause.
That was
Yes.
Pepper and Wicks,
Yeah, the
correct? The
brand was
startup
called Pepper
that
and
you worked
Wicks.
in G? Did you kind of spearhead that because you were already working with a lot of fem care brands? Were you the person who sparked the genesis
A
of
good
that brand at
question.
P&G?
So I was the founder of the brand, but I didn't have the original idea. The original idea actually came from our R&D team because we had this incredible moisturizing technology. And oftentimes, sometimes we have these technological breakthroughs. And the question is, what's going to be a good use case for this? And so someone had the very smart insight that it could be it was like the way that the moisturizer worked is that it was really helpful for adding moisture to like very viscous parts of the body. So, like, without getting too deep. Anyway, the
Mhm,
type of skin that's on the inside of your mouth was where this moisturizer was working really well. So, what other
mhm,
part of the body it has the same type of skin as the inside of your mouth? Your vaginal area. And as it turns out, vaginal dryness is one of the biggest menopause symptoms. And so, connecting those dots to connect the technology to a customer need is how this menopause platform was envisioned. And then because I had done some really cool things across other legacy fem care brands like Tampax, the company asked me to come and be the founder leading this business on menopause. And so that was the first time I had to like price something from scratch, which is always really tough. But I also had a bunch of other really cool experiences as a startup founder.
let's talk about pricing from scratch. And obviously, you were able to found this brand within this huge conglomerate. So you had R&D, you had marketing budget, you had a structure and team in place to really support. But a lot of people who are tuning in today are solopreneurs, small, lean teams. They are trying to go from
Hmm.
small business to startup. They're just now getting capital, especially thinking about Black women and how we, have dominated in creating new businesses and stepping into entrepreneurship, especially over the
Hmm.
past, 5 to 6 years, right? But thinking about pricing, there are various approaches that you can do. When you are in the business, it's data analytics, projections, case studies, seeing what competitors are doing, right? It's all analytical and numbers on a spreadsheet, or it can be. But then when you shift gears, because you're CPG, right, you have to think about what is going to drive the customer to, like you said, pay this premium. So, what was your approach in setting the price for that brand? And how do you find that balance or synergy between what's going to be best for the business, but what is ultimately going to appeal to people who are going
Yes.
to spend
It's true.
money at
This
my
is why
business?
this topic is one of my favorites because it really brings art and science, like human insight and analytics together. So it's really hard to price something the first time.
Mhm,
And this is going to be potentially counterintuitive to people. But when you are pricing a product that is new or it is the first time you are pricing it, the first place you should actually look is your competition because no one understands the price of things in a vacuum. Everyone is looking at price and they are comparing it to something, whether it's another substitute or another competitor, or they're comparing it to how much money they have. Regardless, everyone is starting with some point of comparison. So the first thing you want to do is look out into the world, into your competition, and understand what today people's expectations are for what something should be priced, and that expectation is going to be built off of what the things are priced currently in the market. So for me, there weren't a lot of vaginal dryness products out there, but there were a few. So we looked at the vaginal dryness products
mhm,
that were in the world, and we also looked at like other supplements that people were using for menopause and treatments that people were using for other symptoms. So we actually comped it to a lot of skincare and vitamins and that kind of thing. And that's how we understood the like general lane that we could play in from a pricing perspective where people will be willing to pay this amount. And then if you have a product that people
mhm.
use, that they consume, like a lotion that will have to be purchased again, the other part of pricing is how much you put into your package and then how much in that package, how much, the consumer will get out of that package for the amount that they're paying. And so all of that becomes a bit of a math problem, but it really starts with just like very intuitively, what are people willing to pay? What are they paying in different parts of the different items in the business and like what's going to put them in the realm of possibility. Great. So you do that part. The next thing you do is you ask yourself, how should my product be positioned? Are we a premium product, which means that we are creating more value than the rest of the category so we can price it at the top? Are we a savings product where we have figured out that like, or our stuff is not as quality, but it's like, has something else special about it? Or I have something in my cost structure that allows me to offer it for cheaper. So I'm going to be like the value product. So that's the second thing. It's like, where do you fit in this universe? And that is going to basically tell you how to price it such that your consumer is going to be able to buy it. Then there's the part that you mentioned before, profitability. Okay, can I make money at this price? And you have to go in that order. Well, you don't have to. I recommend it. And that is because I am taking this consumer led lens. Um, but you have to start with what the consumer is willing to pay, in my opinion. You just have to. And then you say, okay, based on how much it costs me to create this product, if we're talking about a lotion, the cost of the goop on the inside, the cost of the packaging, my fixed costs, maybe ignore fixed costs, but let's just start with like the variable cost, the cost that go into the actual product. Can I afford to do it? So if I'm pricing this bottle of goop at $30, how much does it cost to make it? Hopefully something less than 30. And in the case of a product that has to be branded, it needs to be far less than 30 because you have to spend a lot of money on your fixed costs like marketing in order to sell it. So ideally, there are a couple of rules of thumb in CPG, and they're going to change depending on what your business is, how much margin you want that to be, which is basically the difference in the cost of the product and the price that people are willing to pay. But that's the equation. That's really that's the simple, like that's the whole thing. How much people want to pay? How much does it cost me to make it?
Yeah.
We're done.
Yeah. And it sounds so simple. In my experience, the company I co-founded is a beauty retailer. I've since stepped down from day to day, but my co-founder is still active and runs as CEO. So we weren't making or developing
Mm,
products,
mm,
but we were curating and vetting them to be. And this is all beauty, hair, skin, fragrance, fem care, even wellness. A lot of times, brands are new, they're emerging, they default to my profit margin at 50%. You know, if I'm selling something for $10 and it costs me $5 to make it, then I'm profitable. Or if I'm selling something for 40 and it only costs me $20, then I'm making a profit. And we've seen how that is false in so many realms, like defaulting to that number because like you mentioned, a lot of times if I'm making a product, I'm just talking about the cost to make that product and maybe the packaging and maybe the shipping. But I'm not thinking about the marketing, the soft things around that
mhm.
hard product, right? So is there sort of a template or profit margin goal that you think founders and brands and businesses should think about when they're launching a new product or even revising? Like, you should hit this margin and scale from there versus trying to fit into this default 50% model that a lot of people do follow when they start out.
Yeah, I'm gonna answer that in two ways. So I'm gonna start with my nerd answer. My nerd answer is that your margin is actually the output of what your customers are willing to pay minus your costs. So you don't actually get to set your margin. So if you
Mhm.
start from a place of I want to have this margin, um, the only thing you really have control over, like for real, from an economic perspective, is how much it costs you to make it. So if you are stuck on having a certain margin, you should focus on your cost structure because the marketplace will tell you what consumers are willing to pay. That's the first thing I'd say. The other thing that I think for early entrepreneurs tend to discount or not think about enough is that there is a trade off and a balance between growth and profitability. And so you will have, and so like the more you want to grow, typically that means you need to reduce the price of your product. That is why things go on sale. And especially when you're dealing with a retailer, which the dynamics of brand, manufacturers versus retailers, or, like brands versus retailers is a whole separate conversation. But if you're going to go to retail, you should expect that in order to drive more volume, you may need to give, give some reduce your price a bit. Because ultimately, your profit margin is not how much money you make. Your profit margin times the number of products that you sell is how much money you make. And selling more may mean that your margin per item has to come down a bit. So that's the math, y'all. Like, um, and it is true that people can get concerned about discounting too much or having a price that's too low because you can grow yourself into bankruptcy if you are not able to cover your costs. So I understand why people are concerned there. Um, and it's a tough sort of dance to do, but you really have to consider not just what the margin is, but how much absolute dollars you want to make. And you will be constrained by how much people are willing to pay. And the retailer probably knows more about what people are willing to pay than you do. Because if you're selling through retail, you're selling to their customers, and that retailer is going to know the customer better than you will. You can decide how you want to price stuff on your own site because those are the customers that you are closest to and you know the best, and you can advise. But ultimately, how much absolute dollars do you need coming in the door? And that's going to be a balance of your price and your profitability.
So, Pepper and Wits was sort of your first career opportunity to
Hmm.
set the price from the very beginning. I know you started at your last 2 years at P&G, and now you are at Uber, where you have been since
28.
2018. So 7 years at Uber now. And Uber is such an interesting company to me. I'm an Uber girl. I just got my first license in life, like 2 or 3 months ago. I lived in New York for 10 years. I wasn't driving anywhere and I wasn't trying to drive when I moved to a driving city. So I have been with Uber from the very beginning as a customer. When it was, purely purely ride share. And we've seen what the company has evolved to now. And it has such a heavy presence in the market, but it didn't start off as a profitable company, right? And I think that a lot of people maybe don't understand the nuance or how a business can grow to this size and have captured this much market share and not necessarily be profitable. So, can you kind of tell me a little bit about what it was like entering into Uber in that space where this huge dominating company needs to maintain operations, but also still be driving toward profitability? Like, what sort of challenges were you faced with when you joined
Yeah.
that
So what I'll
team?
say is the idea of being profitable is really about what your investors need and what your investors expect. In the context of a small business, like if you're a business of one, you are the investor. And in the case of a big business like Uber, we had lots of people on our table and lots of investors. And so it was the expectation that we needed to become profitable. And then before I go into the story, the other dynamic I just want to give everyone, which is a little bit math, but I think it just like makes it all very real. When a business is growing really fast and it's
Mhm.
not profitable, that means it's burning money. It means like it has less cash each year, which means that you have to have cash to burn. And so it is a privilege of sorts to be in a position where you're growing a business really big and it's not making profit. Like that's not something that a lot of small businesses are able to do because a lot of people don't just have like cash laying around, or they may not have investors who are willing to allow them to burn money. And so in the case of a disruptive innovation like Uber, especially in the era in which we were growing, there was this belief that the growth could precede the profitability. And that's what happened. We grew and we grew really big. And the investments we made in pricing, some of the investments we made in marketing sort of allowed us to grow really, really fast. And then over time, we had to pull certain levers, make our cost structure more efficient. And that is what allowed us to turn into profitability. And so what it was like during that time, it was really shifting from, call it like getting profitable is a little bit about discipline, particularly around cost. Like we went from sort of a throw it in the bag kind of mentality to, okay, I need to think about how much we're spending on marketing. I need to think about how much we're spending on the cost of payment card fees. We had to start thinking about how much we were spending on the cost of insurance, how much we were spending on travel for our employees, and all of those different costs. Because the thing that ultimately delivered profitability for us was tightening up our cost structure. So, in the case of a lot of small businesses, I
Mhm.
think that's one place that people don't tend to look. And I think, particularly when people have product businesses that have supply that they have to purchase, when you're small, you get the worst prices, the worst rates, the worst cost structure on, the items that you're buying. Like if you have a beauty business and you have to buy little vessels for lipstick, a major brand might get that
50.
vessel for, I don't know, 3 cents each or something, and you have to pay 10 cents each in the beginning. But if you have the cash, then you can afford to make price that thing competitively. And once you reach a certain scale, you can go back to your suppliers and say, okay, I need to get the cost of this down, or I need to move to a different supplier with a better cost structure. And it's the like less fun, less sexy part of running a business. But I honestly think that it's the better place to go in terms of creating more profitability because your price should really be determined by what your customers are willing to pay. The other thing that you can do, uh,
I was going to say that I love that you spoke from what your costs and what your expenses are standpoint, because a lot of people think that in order for my business to be successful, I have to make more money. So I have to only sell at a premium, or I have to, raise my price, or I have to raise my prices. Or if I'm in a retailer, I have to align with the ultra luxury retailers who have the
Mhm.
customer that can spend that money versus pay. I can make more money. I can scale toward profitability if I
Yeah.
cut my costs, right? And we'll come back to this. I want you to finish your second point, but I want us to come back to what it looks like to
Mhm.
cut those costs once you get done with
Now let's stay
that.
there. It's hard, but it's hard. But I think there's some really cool ways that you can think about it, though. So I have a few stories for you. The best way to
Yeah.
approach not just cutting costs, I like to call it like being more efficient, is to again start with your customer, start with your consumer, and start with what do consumers care about the most. Like maybe in the first iteration of your product, you had the packaging that had the gold trim around it and like little speckles of glitter on it. But maybe you figured out
Mhm.
that your customer actually is like into the clean girl aesthetic. And that's an opportunity for you because you can get her a product that fits her aesthetic more. And because it's a simpler packaging, it actually costs you less. And so the crazy part with something like that is you might even be able to charge more because now it is like a better fit for her need. Like it's exactly what she wants. And it costs less for you to deliver it. And so you're making profit, you know what I'm saying? While like increasing your price. But ideally, you can pass along some of these savings to your consumer, and that allows you to give even more volume because you get to decide what you want to do with your margin. So, definitely start with what is it
Mhm.
that consumers care about and how do I get rid of the stuff that they don't care about as a way to cut price. Another is to
Yeah.
think about what you can innovate on. This is less on the variable cost side, but one of the biggest fixed costs that especially small businesses have is marketing. And now we have lots of tools, AI tools, digital tools that help us that basically can turn everyone into a single person agency. And what used to be incredibly expensive because you had to hire all these people or hire all these tools, or, it took a long time, you can actually do really quickly with AI tools. And that's another way to take that marketing line item and make it smaller so that you can either pass some of that savings on to your customer or take it home.
I come from like a professional background, so it's a lot of I lean toward creatives, but when you step into the business world and space and the pace in which things have to move, you have to use these tools. You have to adapt, right? Do you have any tools off top that helped you or your team at Uber? Or was there something that your team at Uber adopted or built that sort of helped make it easier to make these pricing decisions as you all were scaling and growing the company?
Yeah, all good questions. So we are a tech company, and so our entire business has been built on machine learning. So before AI was in the zeitgeist and generative AI was a part of the productivity suite, our matching and pricing and onboarding and lots of elements to our business were powered in some ways by machine learning. So I can give you one example of a way that we use AI, and I'm trying to cycle through all of the ones that are uh, easy to explain. So one use case we have is there's a chatbot if you have a support issue. So we have actually found that like when things go wrong on a trip, there's a lot of things that are actually really easy for us to be able to solve. And so our agents, our
Yeah.
live agents, we can have them focused on the really hard problems and the really complex problems and things that are super easy, like um, what's something that's really easy? Like I I had to cancel the trip. I want a cancellation fee, or I got charged a cancellation fee. I don't think it's fair. Something along those lines. We can use an automated system to be able to solve that kind of very simple support issue. So then our agents can focus on the things that are really complicated and difficult. Another use case for AI is internally, we have to access lots of data. I mean, just like millions and millions and millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of lines of data. And our analysts are able, because of generative AI, to generate reports and analysis in hours that used to take days. And it's just helping us work more efficiently. And that ability to work more efficiently means that we can create products more quickly, get them out to customers more quickly, and everybody, and like, add more points to the board.
What was one of the first innovations at Uber when you started that you either led or contributed to that ultimately led to a more efficiently operating
Well,
enterprise?
that's such a good question. I'll do one that's actually pretty simple. We realized that people weren't able to get their work done because they were in meetings too much. We launched that me and my chief of staff at the time launched this campaign called Cut 30. And it was it was a challenge to everyone to reduce the time they spent in meetings by 30 minutes. And what that did was allow for people to be able to spend more time, like, actually getting their work done. And so the way we incorporated AI tools is a part of the principle was make every meeting more efficient, meaning, like, and also allow it so that there are, like, not everybody has to come to that meeting. And so one way you do that is turning on a AI transcript note taker on the video chat software, which allows people to generate notes in an instant from the meeting. They can distribute them, and then everybody didn't have to be there. And so, Cut 30 was a productivity campaign that we led, and it worked really well.
I love that because people don't think of time or people's talent and where it's directed in
Hmm.
the workplace as something that can ultimately help you run more efficiently. Yeah, you get your time back, but that does often
Yeah,
impact the
there
bottom
you go.
line, right? Uh, okay, quick
Okay.
pop quiz question. I'm a small business entering into CPG. I need to cut three. What three things would you advise that I cut industry agnostic?
Oof, that's a good one. Okay, so I'll narrow this down to focus on the cost structure around your business, and let me think some things that I see that we don't. Okay, I would make sure that your external packaging is truly only what's necessary for your users. So when we got into the e-commerce era, there was this big thing around the unboxing experience. And the reason why people buy stuff online is because when you get home, you can unbox it. And it's this beautiful experiential thing. People don't want all that packaging. People do not want all those pieces of tissue paper They don't need your hand.
That, not everybody's an creator.
Exactly. So create a nice, beautiful PR box for your PR that you're going to send to your influencers and that'll get posted online. That'll be a part of your marketing. But the packaging that is sent to your everyday consumers should work really, really hard to communicate your brand promise, to make people feel like this is the right positioning that you have it to be, and to protect the product itself from the elements. And those should be the 3 things that it's doing. Everything else is probably unnecessary. Okay, so that was 1. You told me to cut 3, but that one was really easy. I would also ooh, okay, I would cut out your haters. I would remove people from your life and from your business who are not invested in your success. And so this one is not going to make your cost structure better, but in a way it will because it means that your energy as the founder, as the leader of this brand is very valuable. And so you have to use each minute with the best and highest use of time. And so anytime you're spending on things that are draining your energy or extracting value from your business is only going to contribute to worse outcomes. So that's the second thing. And I would say the third thing to cut, yeah. Find the most efficient shipping that you can find. Find the most efficient shipping process that you can find. Like, cut out overpriced shipping processes. Determine whether or not your consumers need something right away. And if they don't, the most important thing you can do is just set expectations for how long it's going to take so they know, and then use the shipping that is going to like be most efficient for your cost structure. Okay, those are the 3.
Yeah. No, I love that. I think, with companies like Amazon, right? Everybody is like, I need to offer free shipping, or I have to do free 2-day shipping, or I have to figure out how I can get on Uber or a similar delivery app and get it to my customer today. Your customer may not need that, protein treatment that they're only going to use once a month or every other month tomorrow. They might
That's
need it
right.
next week. So when you're thinking about how to reach your customer, right? Think about when they need whatever it is that
Yeah,
you
you
sell.
and you just got to start with what does your customer need? And then don't cut out the things that they need to be clear because then you're going to lose them. But cut out the stuff they don't need and that they're not asking you for.
We have spent a lot of time talking about setting the price, but I think, pivoting, adjusting the price is also
Mhm.
important to the growth of the business. That could be increasing the price of your product. That could be, like you mentioned earlier, positioning yourself so you can offer savings to your customer. Is there any sort of indicator or moment that whether you're a part of a large corporation or your own business, say, hey, it's time for me to shift and adjust the pricing for the betterment of my business?
Yeah, good question. So, what I would say is that yes, there's always times when you may want to pivot your pricing. And my bias would be like, play experiment with pricing as much as you can. You may not be able to do that if you're like selling through a retailer, and your ability to learn from those pivots is a function of how much volume you are, like how many items you're selling, because you need enough data to sort of get a sense for whether or not the price change actually impacted anything. But here's some reasons to increase your price. You've gone through your cost structure and you have cut as much as you can, and the math is still not mathing on your profitability. Then you got to increase the price or decide that it's not working. Another reason to increase the price is because you have added value to the product. Something about the product is better than it used to be. And so that means that your customer is willing to pay more. So, like, you're changing your positioning, you're changing your actual item. It's better. Another reason to change the price is really this is not changing the price, but you can launch something that's at a higher price point than your core product. And that gives you what's called like portfolio strategy, where the additional margin you get from that nicer version helps to pay for discounting your base version. So that's increasing the price. Reasons to decrease your price. because you want to grow. You might decrease your price to attract a brand new customer. And it's possible that you lose money on the first item you sell to that customer because you believe that they're going to come back and buy from you in the future. And so over the lifetime of that customer, you actually become profitable, even if it took a discount to get them to try it the first time. Another reason is maybe seasonally you do sales. Like we all know, Sephora has a sale twice a year, and the brands at Sephora are going to use that sale for all kinds of strategies. Some of it will be trial, some of it will be market share, right? Because I use the sale to stock up. So if I'm stocked up on my Fenty Hydro Visor SPF, that means that I'm not using the next brand's SPF for at least 4 or 5 months. So driving share gain is a reason to decrease your price. You're just priced too high. You maybe you thought that you were fancier than you really are, and your competitive situation and your consumers are basically telling you that they're not willing to pay as much as how you have priced it, so you have to lower it. But again, you have to do this math because your margin times the volume is what's going to determine how much money you make, not just the margins. What else? Oh yeah, if your competitors cut their prices, baby, you might have to cut yours too. That's just the game. That's why I say that like your margins are an output of what's happening in the market.
I come from a beauty background, and there's been a lot of talk in the industry recently because Louis Vuitton just launched a $160 lipstick. And we know that brand is beyond premium. It is luxury. It is among the top luxury brands in the world and has been for ever at this point. But, we've seen an interesting response to it online, even from people who are fans of the brand. What am I gonna do with a $160 lipstick? What are your thoughts on pricing in that way? Could it be signaling something other than we're trying to sell this product?
So I'll tell you a story from P&G. When I first joined the Charmin team, we had actually increased prices and we thought all of our competitors were going to do it too. And they didn't. And so I spent like my first year basically going through and surgically discounting, adding more promos in because we were just priced really high and the rest of the industry didn't follow. So mistakes can happen, mistakes were made. Here's the thing about luxury goods. The pricing model for truly luxury goods. So I don't just mean like the premium products, premium sort of mass produced products, true like actual luxury goods, the way that you think about pricing actually flips. So in a normal economic context, there is an inverse relationship between price and volume, right? Like the lower your prices, the more stuff you're going to sell. That's generally true for the vast majority of products, even the nicest, highest quality, most premium products. It is generally true that when you price it lower, you will sell more. For luxury goods, it's the opposite. Sometimes hitting that right price point is what is required in order to sell more because the price itself is this signal of quality and it's kind of product itself. It's the strangest thing in luxury goods. Like, it's the strangest thing. And what's happening is a lot of luxury brands are actually selling products with just premium mass produced positioning. So, like, I have a YSL mascara that I really enjoy. I bought that YSL mascara at Sephora. Is it one of the higher priced mascaras at Sephora? Yes, but it's not in the luxury goods model when it's in that context. You know what I'm saying? So it's possible that Louis Vuitton was trying to create a lipstick that was almost like a loss leader. Like it's not their goal to sell a lot of volume on this lipstick. It can't be with it when it's that price. But it could be that they're almost treating it like it's marketing to say like this is a super exclusive item. But also, if people find if it is convincing to people that there is some exclusivity associated with this lipstick and it is like truly outstanding. If people actually start to believe that, they will sell. They will sell at that price point. The question is, will it work? And like, who are the people who are going to buy into that? And I don't know enough about Louis Vuitton's customer base to know. I didn't buy it.
not yet. They might convince us. So, Camille, I know that, in addition to the work that you've done at P&G and now at Uber, you also lend your expertise to consulting and mentoring small business owners as they are working to grow and scale their businesses as well. Is there a common thread across the board with small business owners that you work with or startup founders that you work with? Where you start to see a turn in not only their mindset and how they approach it, but also in their business's bottom line.
Yeah, totally. So I have worked with, in terms of pricing, small business owners, startup leaders who fit in two categories. One is people who underprice themselves, and two are people who overprice themselves. I don't have that many people who overprice themselves. Like, I kind of think that, like, you know, especially for, well, with the folks that I have worked with, the underpricing thing seems to be the like really sticky problem. And it's because they just want to sell stuff. Like, they just want to make sure that like price is not a barrier, and that like I don't want people to
Mm,
be turned away, or I don't want people to scoff at me for
mm,
selling things that are too expensive. And the problem that they experience is they usually are not even selling for enough money to make money, right? I have a couple of friends who were selling like prepared food type goods, and they would go off to, the grocery store, or whatever they got their supplies from, buy their supplies, and then they would build their stuff, and then they would go out to sell it, and then they would price it at just, whatever felt good to them. And I was like, well, how much did it cost per item? And that just like, even the thought of that, just like it was like it broke them. And it's because a lot, sometimes like people have different skill sets when they start a business. Like some people, their superpower is, analysis. Sometimes their superpower is people. Sometimes they're creative minds. Sometimes they're, like great inventors of products. Whatever it is probably not pricing. So I get it, right? That's why I'm here. And so what I've had to do with them is just first get them in front of a spreadsheet, and just do the math, like write down how much you spent on supplies and divide that by the number of items that you're intending to sell or even that you made. And then from there, we can see like, is your actual fixed cost or variable cost, excuse me, like, what do you have to work with? And if that's not even, and if the price you're selling it for is just like you're not going to make any money. So the first thing that I have seen to answer your question is now I have businesses that actually make money that I have advised. And that's nice. That's helpful. I would say on the pricing too high side, that is really about, you know, especially people who are very have take a lot of pride in the thing that they've built and have all of these beliefs about what they think it's worth or what it should be worth or what their time is worth. And again, I go back to the thing I mentioned earlier today, where the amount of money you make is volume times your margin. It's not just one of them. And so I, again, have to just go back to the math and say, like, here's the math. You've already done the art part. Let's do a little bit of science. Here is the math. And for those folks, sometimes they end up, just not having a lot of volume. And they're okay with that because they want to maintain the pricing that they have, and maybe they have other sources of revenue or whatever. With other people, I've helped them to sort of, get those sales up, get those bookings up so that their business can grow.
wrap this up with a little bit of fun, and I would love to dive into Camille, the consumer, right? We know Camille, the corporate leader, Camille, the price strategist, but I want to talk about what's inside Camille's cart, okay?
Okay.
So a few little rapid fire fun questions to close this out. What are three things that you are going to pay the price for?
Business class flights. That's
Mm,
one. Dinner. Like I don't look at the price on the menu. I look at the item that I want, and
get
I
that. Okay.
'Cause if I want it, I want it. Just generally experiences, like, I'm turning 40, I'm planning a big party, and I see it, I want it, I stunt yellow bone it, I dream it, I work hard, I grind till I own it. That's the energy
As
for 40.
and when is your birthday?
It's in March.
Okay, yeah, it's milestone. You gotta celebrate and go for it. Go. You've got to celebrate and go big with these milestone birthday. Every birthday, actually, honestly, I'm one for spend it on a celebration.
Mhm.
Is there anything or experience that you now look back on and say, the price was too much for what I got?
Yeah, I'm gonna this one has some conversation on the internet, but I'm gonna go ahead and add to it. I went to the family reunion food and wine festival last weekend. I took my mom for her birthday, her 65th birthday, and we had a great time. We really did. I truly enjoyed myself, but it's really expensive. I wouldn't go back for what we paid. It's so if you haven't heard of it, is there's a black chef, Chef Kwame, and he partners with Sheila Johnson at her resort in Middleburg, Virginia, and they throw this huge food and wine festival. In
Mhm.
retrospect, I think that it's priced for people who work in the industry. Like if you treat this like I'm going to an industry conference and I'm going to meet with some of the best black minds in food, if you're deep in it, if you're like a, food journalist and media, if you own a restaurant, if you're a chef, like I think those are the people who get the absolute most value out of the experience. But like me and my mom went for just the evening portion of it. So Thursday, Friday, Saturday night from
Yeah,
starting at 7 p.m. It was
yeah,
$900 for 3 dinners. And then we had a special dinner one night and that was extra. And there was a DJ and it was a lot of food and, like, I will take nothing away from the experience was amazing, like, the food was so good. I had not a single bad meal. We had a great time, but $1,200 for 3 dinners was quite a lot, so I'm glad we did it, wouldn't do it again.
yeah. No, that's a good point. Hopefully, somebody from this is watching, and maybe this is a consideration for their pricing structure, right? Maybe they have the industry insider track in experience and pricing, and then maybe they have one for people who, just love food and love to eat and want to have some good meals. Hi. So that could be a
Mhm.
takeaway. Last question. Is there one thing that you have held off on because of the price, but you either really, really want it, or one day you're just going to look at that spreadsheet and YOLO, I'm getting it.
Um, I mean, yeah, yes.
Are you easy? Seems like it's a couple things
There's a few
circulating in your
things.
head.
Of course, there's always things.
Give us a few
I
things.
mean,
Give us a few.
okay, at the top of my, like, I will know I have made it list is a vacation home. Like, I don't have that. I would like it. Uh, what else? Oh, you know what? I do there's a certain very expensive handbag that you have to spend a very high amount of money over time with a sales agent in order to even like qualify for. I have not entered into that process. And I don't know that I will, but part of me feels like one day I will just feel like let's go ahead and do the quota bag thing.
Yeah.
I do have one. I got it on consignment. But like the true process, nah. So, if you see me one day with my Kelly, you'll know that I bit the bullet and did the
You know,
thing.
hit that goal, honey. Yes. I love it. I love it. Well, the vacation home, wherever you want it to be, Hermes or a few are going to be in that closet at that vacation home. They're going to be on vacation bags. So if that thing is coming for you, Camille. But thank you so much for today and for this conversation. This is one of those conversations when you talk about money from a business standpoint and cost and setting this and adjusting that. It's not amongst the sexier conversations, but it is literally the conversation that can determine whether or not you're going to sink or swim when you enter into this
Absolutely.
arena. So
Absolutely.
thank you much for sharing it in a way that's digestible, that is approachable. You know, you didn't make it too numbers heavy and analytics and tech talk heavy. You made it something that I hope people can listen to and come back to and get a keen understanding because it is that important. So, thank you so much for spending the time with us today. And thank you to everyone who tuned in. I hope you took something from this. Share it with somebody else who needs to take something for this. Come back and watch it time and time again. And in the meantime, when we sign off, Camille, if there is a space or a way people can follow you, your career, your work, what would be the best way for our viewers to find you?
Sure. Honestly, LinkedIn. So in dash Camille J. Irving. You can also find me on Instagram at Camille Irving. And Angel, it was such a pleasure chatting with you. Listen, folks, feel free to reach out if you ever want to chat about pricing. I do love to advise small businesses. So hit me up.